There's not many better ways to start your day than with a fresh pandesal. Pandesal is a Filipino bread roll that is typically had in the morning with breakfast. It's super light, fluffy, and is like biting into a cloud. In this video, I'll be showing you how you can make perfect pandesal that will rival what you can get at the best bakeries without the use of any artificial dough conditioners. In this recipe, we'll be using a Tangzhong to achieve the pillow-like texture that is signature to pandesal. A Tangzhong is a Chinese technique in which we take a small portion, or in this case 10% of the total flour from the recipe, and pre-cook it with water or milk until it forms a thick slurry. A Tangzhong will allow our dough to hold on to more water, which will help generate more steam that will cause a higher rise in the oven, and the resulting bread will stay soft and fresh for longer. It's an extra step, but one that will certainly make a huge difference. To get started, we are going to first prepare our Tangzhong. To a small saucepot, add 255 grams of whole milk and 45 grams of all-purpose flour. With the heat off, whisk until all the flour has been dissolved. Once all the flour has been dissolved, continue whisking over medium heat until the roux has thickened. Throughout this process, it's important to whisk continuously and not step away from the stove. Otherwise, your resulting Tangzhong will be lumpy and you should probably start over. When your whisk starts leaving faint trails behind in your mixture, turn off the heat and continue whisking for another minute. When your Tangzhong reaches 150 degrees Fahrenheit or 65 degrees Celsius, the starches from the flour will begin to gelatinize, and this is what leads to the thickening of the roux. It's okay to go a little bit past this temperature, but if we end up going too far, we run the risk of losing too much water and altering the hydration of our recipe. After preparing your Tangzhong, immediately transfer it to the bowl of a stand mixer and make sure to be thorough when scraping out your pot. Then add 80 grams of milk, 45 grams of sugar, and 10 grams of salt. Stir until everything is well combined. This will help cool down our Tangzhong and make it ready so that we can add in one large egg. Beat in your egg and then add 5.5 grams of instant dry yeast and give it a quick stir to hydrate. And lastly, add in 405 grams of all-purpose flour and mount the bowl on a stand mixer. If you don't have a stand mixer, I'll detail an adaptation of this recipe in the description that is more hand-knead friendly. Also, in the future, I plan on releasing another pandesal video that will not require a stand mixer, so be on the lookout for that. The following will be mixing instructions for those who are lucky enough to have stand mixers. I'm using a KitchenAid stand mixer, and I started my mixer on speed 2 or the second slow setting and ran it for about 2 minutes. Our goal with this step is just to hydrate the flour, and when your dough is homogeneous, turn off your mixer and allow your dough to rest for 15 minutes. After the first 15-minute rest, the flour will be fully hydrated, but not too much gluten will have developed because of the fats in the dough from the whole milk and egg yolk. But still, hydrating the flour speeds up this process, and even then it still takes a while. Run your mixer on a medium speed, or in this case I use speed 4, for about 10 to 11 minutes. Throughout this process, there's probably going to be times where you feel like, hey, this dough is way too sticky, I should add a little bit more flour. Whatever you do, don't do that, because you're going to end up drying out your bread and you're going to end up with dense dinner rolls that no one will probably want, but at least you tried. So let's avoid that and just give this process the time it needs and allow the gluten to develop. Now, because this is a high hydration dough, it shouldn't be too hard on your stand mixer, but still it's important to periodically check your mixer and feel if the motor is getting hot. If your mixer feels hot, turn it off and resume once the mixer has had time to cool down. After 10 to 11 minutes of kneading and fighting the urge to add extra flour, your sticky mess of a dough will transform into something that is smooth, strong, and a lot less sticky. There will probably be a ring of dough going across midway on the bowl, so just use a dough scraper and combine those small scraps to the main dough. When your dough is no longer sticking to the sides of the bowl, allow your dough and your mixer to rest a second time for 15 minutes. After the second 15-minute rest, add 45 grams of softened, unsalted butter and run your mixer on speed 3. After adding the butter, the dough will be sliding around in the bowl, and if your hook is having a hard time catching the dough, you can use a spatula to fold the dough over the hook to help things out. After 3 minutes, the butter should be fully worked into the dough, but now the dough will be sticking to the sides of the bowl again. So increase the mixer to speed 4 and run it for about 4 to 5 minutes or until the dough is no longer sticking to the sides of the bowl. When the dough is no longer sticking to the sides of the bowl, decrease the setting to speed 3 and run it for about 3 minutes. And then lastly, finish off the kneading process by running on speed 2 for 5 minutes. The way to check if you have developed enough gluten in your dough is to do the window pane test, which means that you're able to stretch a small section of the dough thin enough so that light passes through without it tearing. If your dough fails this test, knead it for a couple more minutes. The stronger a dough's gluten network, the more potential it has to rise in the oven. Use a lightly wet hand and go around the bowl to release the dough. It's important to use quick movements, otherwise this dough will stick to your hands. After removing the dough from the bowl, shape it into a smooth ball by taking the outside of the dough and tucking it underneath. Continue doing this until the surface is nice and smooth, but don't go too far, otherwise you could potentially tear the dough. Or if you're having a hard time with this method, you can shape it into a ball on the counter using the method shown in my Shopao video. Place your dough ball into a lightly greased bowl, cover it, and leave it to brew for about 2 hours or until it has doubled in size. After 2 hours, or when your dough has doubled in size, punch it down to degas it, and then go around the bowl to release it and place it onto a lightly floured work surface with the smooth side facing up. Push the dough out flat and then using a bench scraper, cut the dough into 4 long strips. To make the dough balls, we're going to be using the same method as shown in my Shopao video, so grab one of the dough strips and tuck the end underneath itself, keeping the smooth side on the outside. And when you think you have enough dough, wrap your pointer finger and thumb around the base and pinch it off. Your dough balls should weigh between 55 to 60 grams each, and if you find yourself with too much dough, wrap your fingers around the base of the dough ball and pinch off the excess. Take any small pieces of dough and tuck them underneath the dough strip and form the dough ball the same as before. After weighing, pinch the seam closed at the bottom of the dough ball. Grab a bowl of plain breadcrumbs and place your dough ball smooth side facing down into the bowl. Try to get as many breadcrumbs as you can on the dough ball. And then place your dough ball into a greased baking tray with the seam side facing down. And if you have one, it's better to use a lightly colored baking tray versus a dark one, because a dark baking tray will make the crust too hard on the pandesal. Once all your dough balls have been shaped and covered in breadcrumbs, cover your baking tray and leave them to final proof for about 45 minutes. After 45 minutes, your dough should have risen, but if it hasn't, give it a little bit more time. Place your tray onto the center rack of an oven that has been preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius and let it bake for 22 to 24 minutes or until the crust is nice and brown. Keep in mind that everyone's oven is different, so adjust the baking time as necessary. Not exactly sure why I tried to do that, but after your buns have finished baking, transfer them onto a cooling rack using a spatula. Wait about 20 minutes or until your pandesal is just warm before consuming. The interior structure of the bread needs time to set. Now, most of you probably already know this, but for those who don't, one of the best ways to enjoy Pandesal is with pimento cheese whiz or Lady's Choice. Many bakeries use dough conditioners to enhance their bread, and we were able to achieve a similar result here by using a Tangzhong. It's a game changer that you can incorporate into any recipe where you'd want more soft and tender bread. Tired of your bread drying out and becoming hard as a rock not too long after you baked it? With this recipe, your Pandesal will stay fresh up to 1 week as long as you store them properly. Now, if you ever baked bread with all-purpose flour before, you know that it usually comes out dense and does not rise too well in the oven. But thanks to the additional hydration from our Tangzhong, our bread was able to get all of the steam it needed to rise beautifully in the oven. It left us with a gorgeous crumb as well as a light and fluffy interior. Alright, that's gonna wrap it up for me. All ingredient amounts and their volumetric conversions can be found in the description. If you give this recipe a try, I'd love to know how your Pandesal turned out down in the comments. And if you like this video, please give this video a like, share this video with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.